Welcome to the deep dive. You give us the source material and, well, we jump right in.
Yep, we dig through it all to pull out what really matters, those key takeaways.
Think of us as helping you navigate your info stack,
Mm-hmm.
get you informed quick, no fluff.
We stick strictly to what's in the sources you provide. We just distill it, show you the core stuff.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're looking at a question that comes up a lot, based only on the sources you sent over. Edward Snowden hero or traitor?
Mm-hmm. And the material we have here is an annotated bibliography. So it's basically a roundup of different articles, different viewpoints on that very question.
Okay. So our job here is to walk through these different angles, these arguments we're seeing in this collection.
See what details really stand out from these specific pieces.
Yeah, and we want you, as you're listening, to really tune in to those different ways of framing it, the bits of info the sources choose to highlight.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's unpack what these sources actually lay out.
Right, so diving in, one of the first things that hits you, looking at this material, is just how divided the opinions were right away.
Oh, absolutely. You've got some really strong accusations flying.
Like Dick Cheney, the former VP, one piece quotes him calling Snowden a traitor, flat out.
And he even suggested, didn't he, that Snowden might be a spy for China.
Yeah, specifically pointing to, where he went initially, Hong Kong.
But then other parts of this bibliography, they show Snowden hitting back at that directly.
Mm-hmm.
He's on record denying being a Russian spy, calls the idea absurd.
Right, and he also says quite clearly, it seems, that he acted alone. No help from anyone, definitely not a government.
So you see that direct clash in the narratives presented in these sources. Spy versus lone actor.
But the criticism, it goes beyond just, policy disagreements or legal definitions. The sources show some really harsh personal stuff, too.
Oh, yeah, like Tom Brokaw, the former NBC anchor.
Yes, he's cited describing Snowden as a high school dropout and a military washout.
Oof. And wasn't there that really weird line?
The cross-dressing Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah.
From a columnist. Bizarre.
It really underscores, as one source points out, the powerful passions his actions stirred up.
Definitely. And the core criticism, reading through several of these pieces, seems to be this idea that he just, put himself above the law illegally.
And endangered the country in the process. Some experts quoted are very blunt.
Labeling him a traitor, not a whistleblower.
Right. And their reasoning, as stated in the source, is that whistleblowers don't typically flee the country with secrets in tow.
Or hide in China and then Russia.
Right.
Which, again, circles back to that travel point Cheney made.
Exactly. His going to Hong Kong first was seen by some, according to these texts, as pretty suspicious.
But Snowden had a counter for that, too, right? It's another piece here.
Yeah, he claimed he chose Hong Kong because of its supposed commitment to free speech and political dissent.
So even the choice of location becomes part of this tug-of-war in the narratives presented.
It really does. Okay, so that's kind of the critical angle we see in these sources. What about the other side? The defense, or maybe a more positive framing?
This is where it gets really interesting and sometimes kind of complex, even within one person's view.
Like Jimmy Carter?
Exactly. Former President Carter. There's a summary of an interview here, and it notes he defended Snowden's leaks about metadata collection.
He called them probably constructive, right? In the long run.
He felt it was good for Americans to know just how far intelligence agencies had gone post 9/11.
Intruding on privacy Americans ought to enjoy. That suggests a view focused on the public benefit, the awareness aspect.
But, and this is the big but, highlighted by the source summary itself.
So hard.
In the very same interview, Carter apparently also called Snowden a traitor.
Wow.
And someone who has disrespected his country.
So, constructive and a traitor from the same person in the same interview, according to this summary.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating point. The bibliography draws out these apparent contradictions within a single viewpoint, at least as it's presented here.
That certainly makes simple labels tricky based just on this material.
For sure. Now, one piece does mention that some people, maybe a select few, do see him as their hero.
Why? What's the reasoning given?
Because he, quote, successfully displayed to the world just how vulnerable people are to snooping by the Americans. So a perspective that he performed a service by exposing vulnerabilities.
Okay, so that view exists in the sources. But that same source, it also says,
What?
that the majority of experts state that Snowden is a traitor who should be banned from this country.
Ah, So among the experts cited in that particular piece, the balance tips heavily the other way.
Right. It just shows the spectrum that this bibliography is capturing from hero to traitor, with expert opinions seemingly leaning one way in that specific source.
And what about Snowden's own view? How does he see himself in all this, according to the sources?
Well, one piece notes he's desperately asking the United States to stop treating him as if he is a traitor.
So it's actively rejecting that label.
Yeah, it says he strongly believes that he has not committed a criminal act against our country.
And he thinks he should be seen.
How? As an American hero. That's the phrasing used. He apparently believes that.
And he even appealed for clemency, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. So we get his self-perception pretty clearly from the material, which obviously stands in stark contrast to many of the other opinions documented here.
It helps to have a bit of context on who he was at the time, which the bibliography also provides some details on.
Right. One piece describes him then as, what, a 30-year-old?
Yep, $122,000 a year computer analyst for the NSA.
And he's identified as the person behind 2 leaks.
Concerning specific NSA surveillance programs gathering personal info on Americans' internet use of tech companies.
So not just random stuff, but programs directly related to these privacy concerns.
Exactly. The sources make it clear he wasn't just some random person. He had specific access related to what he leaked.
And another piece adds he'd worked for the CIA before that, too.
But maybe with less access.
Yeah, far less access to sensitive secrets there compared to the NSA, it suggests.
Interesting. That same piece also mentions some technical details about CIA computer systems.
Oh, yeah.
How so? Saying the limitations help prevent intruders and hackers, such as whistleblower Edward Snowden, from stealing sensitive info.
Huh. So notice the language there.
Yeah.
Even in a seemingly technical description.
He's framed implicitly as an intruder, a hacker, someone stealing.
Exactly. It subtly reinforces one particular narrative, even while just describing a computer system, according to that source.
It's a great example of how these different viewpoints are sort of woven through the fabric of this material.
Yeah. So looking at this whole collection, this annotated bibliography, what do we really see?
Well, you definitely see the whole spectrum. From, outright condemnation, traitor, spy, reckless.
Backed up by details about his travel, definitions of treason versus whistleblowing.
All the way to defending his actions as ultimately constructive, highlighting the public awareness benefit regarding privacy.
Plus his own strong denials, his assertion he acted alone, his self-view as a hero.
And the specific details about his job, his access, the kind of info he actually released.
Right. So what this bibliography really shows us, crystal clear, is that the sources themselves are full of conflicting information.
And really strong opinions. Sometimes, as we saw with the Carter example, seemingly contradictory opinions from the same person, at least in these summaries.
Which I think leads to a really interesting question for you listening to this, based only on the material we've just walked through. Given these specific claims we've talked about, the spy accusations, Snowden's denials, his hero's self-perception, the expert opinions ranging across the board, the impact on the privacy debate.
How do these specific details drawn from these sources shape your understanding of that original question?
Yeah.
Hero or traitor?
Yeah, what part of this material, this specific collection you shared, really stuck with you? Or maybe even made you think differently?
Something to mull over, definitely.
It is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.